Hi, Dad.
Hi, bud.
So, we're sitting here in Mom's beautiful shisha with the support of Divine Source Energy. And someone told me you have a book coming out.
Yeah, I thought you might have heard about it.
I heard about it.
In your past.
I read a couple chapters.
But I do have a book coming out next week.
And obviously pretty exciting. And on the cusp of this release, the idea for us to just have a little conversation and for you to say a few words about it, I thought was beautiful. And when I tuned in just to see where we might start, where we can just get sort of the juices flowing, the word inspiration came to me. And so sometimes really like general questions can feel a little hard to start things off, but we'll see how it flows for you. The question that comes to mind is what that word inspiration really means to you, and how you might speak about living an inspired life, what that feels like to you.
First, I'd like to say that for my interview, I feel honored to have such an experienced interviewer, podcaster, take the time to sit with me.
You're welcome.
And help me along, because the inexperience dragged me along. I think I might say that living an inspired life, my reaction to the question is almost the same. I've been trying to live an inspired life. In other words, that's one way of saying all the motivations that have led me to do all the, quote, spiritual seeking, different techniques that I did, were in an effort to feel I was living the most inspired and most meaningful life that I could imagine for myself. It's those two questions, get phrased differently a lot of times. What is the meaning of life, or how does one live a meaningful life?
Yeah.
They're not separable. They're not separable to me. They're not separable to me. Although it started out as, if you read the book, and it goes into my childhood and some of my worries and my fears, and so at that point it's like, what is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of life? Was really at a young age, and then somewhere along the line it also morphs into living the most meaningful life and the most inspired life that one can, and that's the answers to those questions are really what drove a lot of the seeking that I did, that I try to relate as best I can in the book.
Yeah, and what it brings up in me is like the difference between those two parts of what is the meaning of life and how to live the most meaningful life. It's almost like you ask the question when you don't have a taste of the experience. But once you start to experience a sense of meaning or inspiration, it becomes a guiding light as to how to put that into practice, into action. Because before you've tasted it, before you've experienced it, it's just like, well, what is it? Where is it? And so a question that I think might land a little even easier for you, because it's almost like to go towards inspiration, you need to taste it. And I think for you, there were some people in your life and some books in particular that gave you a taste of that that opened something in you or helped you remember something you always knew and led you further. So, who were some of those people and what were some of those books?
Yes, and it really, for the kind of inspiration that we're talking about, it really started in college. And again, this is a story that I relate in the book. It's really a story from the book. Mm-hmm. Of all things, I was on my way to becoming a business major. And I took a class, a random class, because I needed to fill out my schedule, I think in my sophomore year, and I took a random class because I heard it was a gut, I heard it was an easy course, and I was taking enough hard courses trying to get into the business school and it was about rehabilitation techniques that companies used for disabled people. Then, I'd like to say I was such a wonderful person that I took this class, but I really took it because it was easy. I heard that the professor was a cool guy. Anyway, he used this, he was like a young, liberal, hippie-ish teacher at the time, back in the 70s, and he used it as a springboard to talk about life and other different things, and he introduced in the class us to a book called The Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe, as an example of someone who was high up on the scale of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I think you're aware of from all your training, where living in the different levels of life, and once you get to the higher levels, it becomes called the self-actualized life, where you're completely driven, inner-driven, driven by your own inspiration and your own motivation, and not driven by the external expectations on you from society, from your peers, so forth. And I had never heard of anything like that, and I was tremendously moved by it. And the story of this real person, Walter Russell, from this book, that was the first taste of it for me. That really changed me in a certain way. I was like, wow, I want that. I want that kind of life, that internal driven life. So that was the first thing. One of the next things was early after graduating college. My close friend Steve Denholz, my lifelong closest friend, one night, late at night, when we couldn't go to sleep, handed me a book by a man named J. Krishnamurti. And first I'm like, oh, I don't want to read an Indian guru. And he's like, Chicken, read this. I think that you'll like it. And I was blown away by reading Krishnamurti. Blown away to the point where I became obsessed with him. Obsessed with his writings, which he didn't really write much, but he taught. He spoke for over 6 decades, and so there's volume, thousands of pages of his speeches, and I read a lot of it. I read multiple biographies, so I was really moved by that. So Krishnamurti was huge. Then a few years later, I started hearing about Buddhism and some of the teachings of the Buddha, and I started attending a Zen center in New York in my late 20s, I think. And so Zen philosophy became, and practice, and pure practice, because what you were saying before, Dan, about the fact that there can be an intellectual understanding of this stuff and an intellectual even pull, but to start to experience this stuff, that really transforms you. That really transforms you. And that I knew enough to know that that's what I wanted. And Zen meditation and Zen philosophy is all about that. It's all about the experience and getting out of the mind and just thinking about stuff.
And I just want to go back to, let's use Krishnamurti, for example, because I know how powerful this was for you. What, if you can put into words, what did it give you? Like, what was the, to bring ourselves out of the mind, like what was the experience? Could you put a feeling to reading those words?
Well, yes, I can tell you in particular It was a really powerful emotional experience reading Krishnamurti. First of all, again, I'm reading, just even seeing this name, and I'm thinking, this Indian guru and a mountaintop, and that I'm thinking it's going to be this language that I don't relate to, and I started reading. He writes in very, very plain language. He doesn't use fancy words. He doesn't refer to any holy books. And what he did, what struck me so emotionally, is that he questioned everything that anybody said. And you don't have to start from believing anything that anybody says or told you or taught you in school or religious school, or, look at everything for yourself. And just because these people are up there in robes and they're saying it, including myself, you don't have to believe any of it. Let's just start. We're here together and we're suffering all to a certain extent. And what is this about? And he went on to, essentially, criticize any organized religions, and this was stuff I had in my head and whirling around in my mind since I was in Hebrew school. I was the kind of kid sitting there going, well, how do you know that? God prefers this one over that one, and you're supposed to fear him, and he did this miracle. Well, how do you know all that? I had that, but I didn't have the courage, maybe, to say it or to give myself permission
That's
to even
the word
feel
that was
that I'm
coming to
not
mind,
crazy.
was
It gave me
permission.
permission. I thought, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. Here's this guy that apparently speaks worldwide, and many countless people go saying the stuff that's been in my brain. So it did. It gave me permission to be myself and have the doubts and questions that I'd really had but lay dormant or repressed for years. I'll laugh because we both love music, and a line that's come to mind many times about reading that was from Tangled Up in Blue, and Dylan's, and I don't know if I can remember it on the spot, where he sings something like, and she handed me a book written by an Italian poet from the 13th century. And every one of those words rang true and glowed like burning coals. Something, reaching down like it was, burning in my soul, something like that. And that's literally how it felt. That's
Yeah, the word permission was coming to mind too, that it almost gave you permission to see yourself fully, what was always there under the natural conditions of systems that we grow up in, and we start to feel we have those thoughts, some of us, we have those ideas, some of us, but they're rejected. They're not necessarily welcomed with a red carpet for us to pursue. We need an entry, we need permission, we need something
to fit in.
That reflects back to us the okayness that we weren't meant to fit in. We were meant to chart a different path. And so that path that you have charted, giving yourself full permission, is obviously different than Krishnamurti's path, or different than Eckhart's path, or different than whoever else inspired you. So in what ways might you say your path feels similar, or the burning coal or inspiration feels similar to what you feel inspired them? And in what ways does it feel or look different?
Ask me that again. How do I think my inspiration differs from theirs?
Or your path. Yeah, or your path, or what guides you, or just how it's unfolded for you.
Yeah. Well, again, that just going back to the book for a second, that's a lot of the reason that I wrote the book, and it's a book that I wanted to write. You guys, all my family, have heard me sort of toying with the idea of wanting to write a book for many years. And then this came together because I would say that my 2 cents to throw out into the world is that I'm living a much different life than those guys. I'm living this very ordinary Western life, have a typical sort of, Western business career in real estate and have a family and, living a typical sort of Western society life, and yet at the same time have been pursuing these ideas, which really, as it turns out, and as you know, many in the West are drawn, started to be drawn really in the 60s in particular. There were some in the 50s, but in the 60s in particular. And but anyway, that's what I want, because look, my life couldn't appear more different than someone like Krishnamurti, who
you both love golf.
That's true. I learned that he was a very good golfer, and he spent a lot of time in the West. We went together and visited Ojai in California, where it's funny, that's become a well-known place and resort, but I knew it from 50 years ago because Krishnamurti used to come here and speak in Ojai all the time, and we got, as you saw, I was very moved when we found Krishnamurti's grove, which is still preserved today. So it looks very different from somebody like his. Maybe it looks not quite as different as some of the other, now there's many spiritual teachers in the West that also have,
there's much integration,
that also have very very Western lives, and they're teachers and psychologists and and all sorts of people, and they've pursued this, and we've talked about this. I think it's one of the great things that have happened to, say, some of these Eastern ideas when they've come to the West, and the West has brought its path to psychological and spiritual health and integrated them. So
yeah, and so continuing on that same trend of what you've carried forth and what might feel uniquely born in you or just playing through your unique character is this popular word, awakening. This is a popular word that gets tossed around a bit, and it got tossed around back then, and it gets tossed around now. What does this word mean to you? How do you feel it applies to you? How do you feel it unfolds uniquely in you? Do you feel it unfolds in you now, similar to the way it may have unfolded in you previously? How do you relate to that word?
Well, it's a really important word for me. The word isn't important, but what it points to is important. As you say, it's talked a lot about in particularly Eastern traditions and in the Zen tradition, which was the primary structure of my path. Even though I left the Zen Center and ended up going to a place, the Springwater Center, by a woman, Toni Packer, who left the Zen tradition because she didn't like the robes and the teacher-student, and that really suited my personality. I know, we've talked about it. I think that suits both our personalities, where you get rid of the authority stuff. But awakening to our true nature is a big idea in many of these, including Zen. It's also called enlightenment. It's called, it's talked about in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Recognition of our true nature. And I had, like many seekers, this desire to understand what was being talked about, but I didn't really have any direct experience. And even after a couple of decades of meditation practice, where I had gained a lot, I I felt and still feel. I gained a tremendous amount from it, but there was something that I knew that was being pointed to that I was missing, that I didn't see in the way that a lot of these people that were writing about it had some kind of experience. And it led me eventually to go on a retreat with a current teacher, Ajashanti, and I was in a state of actually very, very frustrated, even in this beautiful place with a bunch of beautiful people. And something happened late at night in a tent cabin for me that was a spiritual awakening. I mean, that is the best description of it. Something happens, and it happens, I mean, I don't know how it happens for other people, but what happened for me is it's like a veil dropped in an instant. I literally, an instant from one moment to the next. And for me, it was like a bit, I mean, it's like a nuclear bomb, and it was also extremely subtle. And I don't want to take too much time, but your basic your essential nature realizes its own nature, realizes its own existence, and everything changes. Everything changes. You know, my mood, my everything changed immediately. I could compare it to, well, I think the Christians talk about being born again. I think they have a big religious experience, and it's similar because it's like being born again, where everything changes, and all these things that you just toyed with intellectually become instantly clear. You also realize that it's every living being's nature, not just your own, and it's crazy. And that that particular experience goes back about 14 years for me now. And so things change states, I was kind of in a state of bliss for months after that. But that all emotional states come and go, at least that's my experience. So that calms down, but my relationship to it, it's still one of the most important, most transformative experiences of my life.
In addition to the experience of bliss, would you also say that it gave you permission? Is it something you might associate with it, similar to the Krishnamurti experience? Because as much as everything changes, would you say there's also a permission to be who you already were?
I wouldn't really characterize it exactly like that. They were very different. I really resonate with the word permission in our earlier talking about reading of Krishnamurti. There's a certain type of permission which comes out of awakening, but there is, and I'll try to explain that briefly if I can, but it's not a permission to be who you are, because it's much more profound than that, because you see who you are, what you are. Actually, it's really what you are, because who is kind of refers to an individual personality, and you wake up to a certain extent out of, you realize you live with your personality, and I live with my body, that doesn't look the same now as 30 years ago or more, but you realize that it is realized that deepest feeling of being myself, of being me, that's always the same, and it's not about a permission to be it, it's just you are it. This is what you are, and you can't actually improve on it or diminish it. And in anything you can do, you can change your moods, and even change your personality and your behavior, but you can't change your essential nature. It just is what you are, and it's deeper than the personality. So, I'll just finish with this, going back to your question about permission. What I found is having had that experience, it becomes easier.
Yeah.
I was able to give myself permission.
The functionality of the realization.
To accept the shadow parts, the parts that I'm not so proud of, the parts where I, acted like a jerk. It's easy to, be with the parts where I feel good about myself and I feel like I did good. It's up for all of us, the times where, you feel guilt or shame, or it became much, much easier to acknowledge those, because I realized those are just, as the Buddhists say, there's 10,000 reasons for everything that happens, and the way you are and the way you react, and it's your environment, it was your parenting, it was everything. So it became easier to acknowledge those things and stop the cycle, mind cycle
of abuse,
of shame and blame, and shame and going into shame and blame.
And yes, because the waking up out of the personality, the functionality of that experience may then create an easier path to express the personality as it is fully expressed, right? And what was the line that your teacher said to you that evoked the state? That you would share with me.
Well, I think we're mixing up.
It didn't come from that line that
Tony.
That Tony shared with you.
No. As a matter of fact, there was many years between that line.
Oh, interesting.
And this experience. What happened that I shared with you was on my very first retreat related. You're asking, my very first week-long silent retreat, and I was very nervous, obviously, going out there. I'd never meditated that much for that long, and going up, so it seemed so exotic, and I went up, and during it, I got to meet, you can do a 10-minute or 20-minute private dialogue with who's teaching, and Tony was still around then, and the teacher, and I sat with her, and as I was relating a certain story about my ambivalence about the idea of God and so forth, and wondering about a certain woman there that was, very much expressed her belief in God and Jesus and so forth, I was, it just seems so conceptual to me. On the other hand, it brings such peace to many people, and I'm envious. And yes, as you know, and Tony just looked at me and said, "Yes, Chick, but she is who she is, and you are who you are." And it didn't trigger this experience. This awakening is completely different. What it did trigger was, which I've also done, I went back to my cushion and within 10 minutes was sobbing uncontrollably. And then all fear and anxiety left me. 100%, which I'd probably never experienced in that state outside of drugs, outside of being on drugs, in my life. And so I walked around in bliss after that for a few days. So that was an amazing experience. It was a different thing.
An insight, if you might call that.
Yes.
It's interesting. It seems like we're talking about almost, you could say, different levels of awakening or different levels of healing or experience within the personality and waking up out of the personality. One was full permission to be yourself and release resistance of other people being who they are, which is a very blissful experience in its own right, and probably has a lot of correlation to what we consider to be trauma healing, because trauma healing is really all based in the personality. and then a different experience that you seem to be describing that is really waking up out of that whole game of anything needing to be healed at all.
I think that's a really great description of the difference. That's right. That's right.
Both very useful in their own right.
Both very wonderful.
Very wonderful.
Both very wonderful. Let me tell you, both very wonderful. I walked around after that story I just told for a couple of days, and I had the deep thought, I have never felt in my life this okay with just being me. And I would walk around, because there's beautiful grounds around the Springwater Center. You can walk around these rolling meadows and woods, and it's beautiful. And I'm walking around there going, I'm thinking, and I was just laughing at everything and thinking, we're all going to die anyway. Why am I so worried about it? And so worried about what other people think? So yeah, no, it was a very, very wonderful.
And those two experiences seem to strike at the heart of the almost paradoxical nature of sort of the illusion of being human or being separate, because you can have an experience of waking up out of the personality, and yet to function in a relational world, you still have to sort of embody that ego, that personality, and live through it, unless you really want to take extreme measures to not have to play that role, play that character.
In the Himalayas, which I wasn't about to do.
Yeah, you chose a different path, or a different path unfolded for you.
And certainly we both read, many accounts of, what you call awakening, and that's just one word, really. It could be misconstrued too, because I'm thinking about that.
Like all
I went
words.
back and I drove some of my meditation friends crazy, going, no, we don't awaken. We're already awake. We're always awake. You're awake. You're hearing me right now. It's a very simple thing. We're always awake. So it's a recognition, a realization. I like those words, kind
of the awakeness that exists.
Yes, and that it's been our basic nature there all along. We're chasing this thing.
While we put on the
we're
character,
chasing it, and it's not. No new state is created. You just realize what's been here all along.
Yeah.
Sort of hidden behind all the thinking, the obsessive thinking, and the attachment to thinking, and we think that we are what we think we are. Now, if you think about that, that's ridiculous, because a thought is just a thought. It's not a reality. It's just a thought about whatever reality is. So whatever we think we are, that's not what we are. We're really something greater than that. We're something more mysterious. It's way more mysterious, right?
And when you have a glimpse
so really mysterious.
When you are granted a glimpse of being able to pull the veils of the character, even temporarily, and to see not something new, something that's always there, it seems to permeate all the layers and just grant you access to.
Oh yeah, and it reminds me, the other thing I was going to say about it, and that's different, I think, for everybody, but I mean, you've accessed a lot of different states yourself, but for me, it was not like an out-of-body experience at all.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people describe a lot of out-of-body.
Mm.
That's not what it was like at all. It was very much an in-body experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I left the body and went into
Mm-hmm.
the astral plane somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It was just this small veil dropping and seeing, this sort of conscious awareness that's here. That's what when I'm thinking about me, that's actually what I'm thinking about. I'm not thinking about my arm unless I'm thinking about my arm. That's why I call it my arm, because the my part, what is that part,
Well, and I think that also points to the idea that awakening is not about escaping
No.
the physical plane. It's
Right.
not about escaping the physical vessel.
Right.
It's actually coming deeper into it and
Right.
embodying it, which is really why we came. We came into this physical density dimension to play out the game, but we can be in the deepest, the fullest physicality of it without some of those other illusions, some of those other veils.
And that's why, and this is your particular area of expertise, and that's what I think the West has brought a lot of in a very positive way. That's why healing our trauma and so forth.
And that's
and
why it's
all
so
of that
important,
stuff
because
is important too, because this idea that, this happens and now everything, and everybody, you live happily ever after and everything's peachy and you're perfect, and well, no.
Right.
We're still living this.
The waking
we're
up.
We're still human beings. We're still a human being.
The waking up, is part of the beauty, but continuing to live within the physical vessel, it's gonna typically involve some trauma healing, because that's what's in
Hopefully.
the physical body, ideally.
A lot of spiritual teachers have done a lot of not so peachy things.
and I feel that's where there are advancements in our society to create more space for this idea of trauma healing, so there can be a merging of like the first experience you had and the second, which is recognizing true nature as well as pathways to heal what is here in this thing.
Yeah. I've tried to do both. And then we try as best we can. To enjoy ourselves, live with the good, the bad, and the ugly, as I tell myself sometimes.
And I think in a conversation we had recently, it's like we choose when we feel we have the capacity to choose.
Yeah.
We make the choice for healing when we feel we have the capacity to do so.
Right, because as I was sharing with you, recent world events have, I've struggled with, and I've really told a lot of people. That's right, and when you can choose to, for me, if there has to be struggle and suffering there, then at least I can acknowledge it and feel it and accept it to the best of my ability and talk to people I care about it. And then, as you say, when we can come back to more center of balance again, when we can, hopefully we make that choice,
Yeah. And so with the completion of one long-held dream, which will surely lead to more opportunities, different potentialities, where do you sense the inspiration may lead? Is there a sense of where you go from here, of what a vision of what you might like to see, or simply enjoying the ride?
It's really the latter for me. It's great. The opportunity to do this is fantastic, and to do it with my son is, over the moon for me. And I don't know where it will lead. What I really enjoy doing, as you know, I've just had a simple, small weekly meditation group, which has been almost going on 20 years now. And so I love talking to people about this. I love it gives me joy, it gives me passion, it helps me. And I often said to all the people that have joined me in this group, it's like, if it helps anyone else, that's great. But as long as anybody shows up, I'm showing up, because I get so much out of it. So that brings me joy. So I hope that continues. And as for the rest of it, I'm trying to enjoy the ride.
Amen. Well then, any final messages? Anything else you feel guided to share for the eventual readers of this book, or simply those who are meant to receive this conversation?
So I tried to write it in a way. I wanted to hopefully touch people. I think a huge group of people that I would put in a group. Not with similar personality traits, but there's a huge group of people I think out there that are interested in this kind of stuff. I mean, obviously everybody's interested. Everybody wants to be happier. Everybody, they may have weird ways of thinking.
Different stories about how that happens.
How that happens, but everybody wants more inner peace and happiness. So everybody's interested on some level, and I think there's a huge amount of people that aren't quite so obsessive about it as I've been. They're not going away on, silent retreats and doing all these things and reading all these things and visiting with all these teachers, and I hope to be able to touch a lot of them, be able to write and communicate in a way that resonates for people, that makes it real and makes it feel meaningful to their life and has a relationship to their life. That's what I hope for.
And a word that really resonates with me is bridge. And I trust that you have been, and that this book is, when I finally get around to finishing it, an effective bridge for the different parts of yourself that exist in, along the spectrum of people.
Right.
Those who, you chat with in business deals, and those who you chat with about spiritual pursuits. You present in your uniqueness a bridge of worlds and create in your own voice and accessibility for people along the spectrum.
Yeah. And I love it. What I think of is that, when I first started pursuing meditation many years, I hid that. I had a very traditional looking life and a real estate career, and I'm talking with bankers and lawyers and, contractors, and I kind of hid that stuff for the most part. And now part of it is just getting older too, but also now I'm having everyday conversations, just as you're saying, with all that same types of people. And at the slightest opening or whatever, I'm very open about bringing up this stuff. And it's amazing how many wonderful little connections it has led to. How many people that are interested and curious about this kind of thing, if you're just open and vulnerable about it. It's led to, great conversations. That's part of what keeps me inspired at work. By the way, going back to your first question about using the word inspired, it's part of what keeps me inspired at work is the ability to engage with people and stay engaged.
And
I don't separate these parts of myself anymore. They're just integrated for me.
And that's the beauty when you say yes to the courage, to the calling, to use the fullness of your voice, to release our shame, whatever is creating the need for, or the perceived need for hiddenness. We step into our gift, we step into our voice, and you see all the people who are ready to benefit from all that you are.
Yeah.
So thank you for using your voice.
Thank you for leading me along this dialogue. That's great.
My pleasure.
That's great. Ellen's telling me to hold up the book. So I'm holding up the book. Thank you, buddy.
My pleasure. Love you.
Love you too.